You can pull that whole thing out, just
scratch the paint,
toss it to the side.
All right, if you clicked on this video and you didn't see how we got the car to not have an engine and transmission in it, click the video in this corner up here and it'll show you how we got to this point right here. Waiting. Well, for any of you that are sticking around to watch this video, I'm going to assume that you already saw me pull the engine and transmission out of this car. So one of the big reasons, besides having no oil pressure in the other engine, about 5 psi when it's running hot, I wanted to upgrade more about this car. One of the things was the steering, because you could do this much of a turn before the car would do anything at all. And then the other thing is the suspension. Let's modernize it. So I want to go in here and we're going to cut a whole bunch of stuff out of here, because I bought in a Mustang II full suspension kit, full steering kit for this car. One of the biggest downsides of these early Fords is look at how tight this engine bay is, because you have that giant shock tower. This giant shock tower. You have these braces. You have this brace right here. You have all this stuff that just makes it super hard to put a large engine in this car. Let's dive into this. I'm going to first kind of disassemble the front suspension. I already got the steering halfway out, so we can go ahead and take care of all of that and see what it's going to look like to put all of these boxes right here worth of parts into that little engine bay and wheel wells. I'm going to go ahead and strip all the wires out of this engine bay because they're just so haphazardly thrown in here. I'm going to take off the steering linkage. I'm going to take off the motor mounts, all that stuff, because a lot of this stuff I'm not going to need anymore. I'm going to take off that fuel pressure regulator. I'm going to just kind of clear this out because I want it to be a nice open slate for me to work in. And I can't do that if it's not truly open. So here we go. So let me get you in here and show you. This is what I mean by sloppy wiring. So look at all that up there. I got splice connectors. Look at all this over here, all these wires, that nasty connection there. Let's go down, all these nasty wires here. What's the sense of doing this work if I'm not going to clean all of that up? You know, I can get rid of the corner of rag, the other corner of rag, and just really tidy up this engine bay. Well, I'm noticing one thing is there's a lot of zip ties and random screws and such and loose wires. So I'm sure that this will be great to reconnect at some point. But today is not that point. So I'm going to just keep on. Oh, I don't know what this wire is, but it came apart pretty easy. I'm going to just go ahead and pull all of this stuff out. Okay, well, I'm noticing a huge hole in the firewall. So that's fun. And more wire. I think I'll probably end up cutting a bunch of wires and regret it later. It's looking like a lot of this stuff is just random connectors, and I didn't care that much about how things got done back in the day, as long as it got done and worked. Well, now, unfortunately for me, I decided I want this car to be nicer and work better. So it's going to hurt my wallet and my time, but that's okay, I guess. Well, looks like cutting them one. Oopsies, I'll regret that later. The more I pull this apart, I'm realizing it's a miracle that any of these wires actually did anything. Because, oh, this is what I was working with. And no, this isn't torn apart extra. This is how it had been installed. So apparently, I didn't care much about details back then. The next step, to me, disassembling the front, is getting off these tires. And I hit a roadblock I didn't expect. I can't get these darn hubcaps off. So I think, and I don't have, of course, what have I learned before? All my tools are at the shop. I don't have a crowbar at the shop to be able to give myself a little leverage to pop it off. But with this screwdriver, I got nothing. All right. Well, what appeared to be probably mere seconds for you guys was a few hours for me. It's been a few hours since I had to leave to pick up this tool right here. So I went all the way to the shop. and this wasn't at the shop. Turns out it was at Hunter's house, which is 25 minutes in the opposite direction of the shop. So I drove to the shop, then to Hunter's house, got to hang out with Hunter's baby, which was cool. And then I picked up this and drove home. So it's been a few hours, and I've had lunch since then. So I'm rejuvenated and ready to work. We'll see. Was the trip worth it? Yes, it was. Let's see if this side is just as explosive as the last. Not nearly as bad, actually. Now that I got the tire off, you can see it's old, antiquated technology, but actually all new stuff. You know, I have new tie rod, new disc brake conversion, all new suspension up there. All this has been updated, but it's just, you know, it's the best of the bad. So really, all this just needs to go away. You know, the main reason is my steering slop is just horrible. It's definitely looking like I forgot some tools at the shop. Once again, my coil spring compressor being the biggest one, but I can still do some other disassembly. You'll see here, I can't get this tie rod end out. So there's a little trick to it. What I can do is you can hit the side, which will briefly change the shape and hopefully free up the actual pressed in fitting. There we go. And that is out. Yeah. All right. So the reason these are called a castle nut is because they look like a castle. Who would have thought? All right, it's neither of those sizes. I found it. All right. And it was only hand tight, so that helps, I guess. Okay, so now that I have this disconnected, this kind of connecting bar, and this castle nut undone, I'm going to see if I can't get that to let loose. There we go. And just like that. Now that I got this all disconnected, the nice thing is I can spin this backwards so I can get full access to the remaining hardware that's right there. So hopefully, with the right wrench and a little bit of persuasion, I should be able to get this to come off. God.
No. Well, shoot. Can lab wrench do it?
Wait a sec. I'm tightening this. I'm totally tightening it. Oh my gosh. You gotta be kidding me. Look at that. And just like that, it came out. After me fighting it, realizing I was fighting it, it just came out just that easy. Let me hit this and hopefully it just falls to the ground. Just like that, success.
We've got the first half of the suspension on the front end taken off. So you got your spring right here and the actual shock itself. So we're going to work on getting the other side done over here. Went surprisingly smooth. It's really only a handful of bolts. The thing that you really want to make sure you got is a spring compressor. We just rented this cheap one right here from AutoZone. So we're going to get going on the other side. After that, the fun part begins because we're going to get to actually cut apart the inside of here. We're going to open this engine bay up, take off all of this extra stuff right here, open these wells. That way we have a lot of room to actually work and get this engine in. So when you're doing the front suspension on this setup, there's only a few main things that you got to do. First off, you're going to take these bolts off of this front part of the upper shock tower. The other part is you're going to come right down here. There are two bolts. There's one here, one on the other side right there. Once you get that, that shock will get released. As long as you got all of the bolts off the top, it'll pull right off. You just pull that whole thing out. And you can pull that whole thing out, just
Scratch the paint.
toss it to the side. Now that you have the shock pulled out of the suspension, it's time to get that spring compressed. So we've got a spring compressor right here. It's a very simple design. You've got the bottom of it right here. It's got these grooves so that it holds onto the top of where the mount is. So it'll go on here just like that, so it grips in. When you do this, you're gonna, the spring will be in there. You slide it in on like that. You drop it down. Once it's in there and hooked up, you've got these hooks. So you're gonna actually hook up this bottom long one first. Once that's on, you start tightening it until it gets to where the next hook is on the spring above it. And then from there, it's as easy as just tightening this until it compresses the spring all the way up to where it's off of the bottom bracket. Once this bottom bracket is free, all you got to do, take off two bolts and hammer this from the inside. You just hit the pins right there till this falls off. Then you slowly release that spring. Make sure you're real careful about that because these springs have a tendency to explode. So now that we've got the spring compressor hooked up on the top, I can show you where the hooks are. You can see one there, one on the spring above it. As this thing compresses the spring, you're going to see it lift off of this bracket right here, and then it's free to get pulled out. You just loosen that spring up, you're good to go. What I'm doing as this comes up, I'm just checking the feel right here. Once that has no tension left on it, you know that it's up enough. You don't need to keep compressing that spring because these things turn into ticking time bombs the more they're compressed. You don't want to release that energy, baby.
All right, JDs and Lenelman, first I want you to notice but ignore and forget the car that you see on the ground behind me, because you're gonna see how we got there in a later video in this series. But next, I wanna show you the suspension that we just pulled out of the car. Now, the reason that I made this swap, even though all of this was new stuff, we have our spindles that are V8 spindles with a disc brake conversion. We have brand new control arms, well, brand new a few years ago, new springs, new shocks. But here's the thing, is this car, I want it to be more. I wanna be able to race it, and I wanna be able to drive it every day. Now with this setup that I had here, which worked fine for cruising around town, the steering was sloppy because the steering was old and original. The suspension was creaky and not very responsive or performance based. And the brakes were, well, the brakes were fine because they were disc brake conversion. But you'll look here. So first off, when looking at this, the reason that the shock towers are so massive in the early era Fords is because they had all of this piled up on top of each other. So on the very bottom, you have your base control arm. And then for some reason, from the bottom of the spindle to the top of the spindle, that's where they put the upper control arm. So you have the whole height of this. Then on top of the top control arm is where they put the spring. So you got to think, you have your base control arm, your spindle, your top control arm, your spring, and then you're all the way up here at the top of the engine bay. So they had to make a huge piece of metal go into the engine bay so you can't fit big engines, big headers. So now what we did is we put in we're going to put in a new Mustang II kit. So what that'll do is it'll give me a more modern style tubular control arms and more compact spring and shock package, and then still disc brakes with slotted and drilled rotors. So on the next or a future episode of Running Rust, you're gonna see me go one step further. I have all this out of the car. Now it's time to use a plasma cutter
cut out those huge old shock towers and get ready to install the Mustang II in a brand new fire-breathing V8 small block Ford. See that soon.